Egocentric means self-centered. It means that we put ourselves in the center. When talking about narcissism, which is something that you hear commonly about a psychological disorder or psychological trait, it means a person who puts themselves at the center of everything. Everybody else, every word spoken, every plan that's made is really at the heart, having them at the center, and everybody else living for their benefit. Egocentrism or narcissism is something that is in direct opposite of what an apostle should be. I've talked extensively in the last few chapters about the need to be servant leaders. The need to, instead of talking about authority, understand it as responsibility. The need to lead for the benefit of the followers. And hopefully that message is being massaged constantly into our minds. Because you and I both need to be that type of leader if we're going to be the apostles to help bring the church into what God has in store. And so when we talk about in this chapter the egocentric leader or the egocentric apostle, I've identified 7 signs starting with page 90. And the reason I've done this is because I want to read these for myself. Someone says, well, where did you get this list of 7? From me. From me. From inside of me. When I've seen things in my motive that aren't right, when I've seen things in me that aren't godly, when I've said things and done things and later thought, what was I thinking? When I've looked back in my life, and sometimes it's easier to see these traits from a distance than it is when you're in the midst of them. When I look back at my life and see areas where I've made mistakes and messed up, wow, that's where I get this list. And so I don't want to be this person. I don't want you to be this person. I don't want to be an egocentric leader. I want to be a God-centric leader. I want God at the heart of everything that I'm doing. God at the heart of the decisions I'm making, the plans I'm making, the vision I'm having, the strategy I'm implementing, how I lead people, preach to people, how I counsel with people and live with them and walk with them and embrace them, how I treat people, to put God at the center and to understand I'm connected and to be led by the Holy Spirit. And my motive should always be first to please God, but also to benefit the people that I have contact with, whether they're, directly in line with me and the church that I pastor and the network that I lead in the International Coalition of Apostolic Leaders or any other assignment that I may be given. How I can serve those people should be at the heart of what I teach, what I do, and the decisions that I make. And so in order to be that kind of leader, sometimes we've got to pinpoint those attitudes and those actions that are in opposition to the type of leader we want to be. That's why I wrote this chapter. I want to talk about, starting on page 90, the 7 signs of an egocentric leader. Number 1, an egocentric leader loves to talk about themselves and make the topic of every conversation evolve around them. Have you ever been to a dinner with someone like that and around the table, and every time that a subject is brought up, this person does all the talking? Now, if you're saying, no, I've never seen that, that's dangerous because you might be that person. Hopefully, you're not that person. If you are the person, see that about yourself. I think there's certain personalities that love to talk, love to be the center of attention. Certain personalities, they do a song and dance and make people laugh and tell the jokes. The problem is sometimes, that's fun to be around that type of person, but a lot of times that's born out of an insecurity. And that insecurity is not your friend. That insecurity will lead you to an extreme in one of 2 directions. Either the insecurity leads you to be ultra-controlling and make yourself the center of everyone's universe, or that insecurity keeps you so timid that you want to hide and you don't want to lead at all. Insecurity is not your friend. So we really got to test ourselves and make sure we're not that guy. Now, I'm talking about someone who makes every conversation about themselves. The topic is always about them. And it's the kind of person that if someone's done something, they've always done it better. If someone saw something, they saw something bigger. If someone's ever achieved anything, they've achieved more. They've always got a better story. They've always got... We have to make sure that we're not that person. That we're not egocentric and love to talk about ourselves and demand that anyone that is in our entourage has got to make every conversation about me, because after all, I am about me. That egocentrism will destroy you. Number 2, egocentric leaders are highly sensitive to criticism. Now, none of us like to get criticized, but an egocentric leader will just absolutely get destroyed because somebody said a critical word, even when it's constructive. Not everything I've ever done in my life has been right. Not everything I've done in my life has been complete. Not everything I've ever done in my life has been the best. And I needed my father in my formative years to look at me and say, son, that's a great job. But I also needed my dad to look at me and say, Mark, you could have done better. Mark, this should have been this way. And I can't let that insecurity just tear me apart to where if anyone says anything, it ruins my world. Egocentric leaders are highly sensitive to criticism. Here's the thing. If you're going to be a leader, you better right now just expect and come to live with criticism from every direction. Number 3, egocentric leaders won't share the spotlight or the podium with anyone. They get offended when somebody else gets promoted. If they're at a conference and somebody else gets recognized, it just burns them up because they didn't get the spotlight. Number 4, egocentric leaders are constantly comparing their own achievements with others. So anytime someone does something great, they can't applaud and thank God for what that person accomplished. If that church did it, then we've got to do it better. And suddenly they're motivated, not out of a heart to serve people or to obey God. They're motivated out of a heart of intense competition to always be the best. Now, in balance, let me say, I don't believe all competition is wrong. Sometimes competition is good to wake people up. I get it. And I'm not saying that we would never feel when someone else gets promoted and we didn't get recognized, that should never bother us at all. Yes, sometimes that does. But here's what I'm saying. You can't live out of that. You can't get motivated by that. You can't let that direct your life. If you do, it will destroy you. Number 5, egocentric leaders will distort the truth and embellish the story to make themselves look good. That's never good. Excuse me. Number 6, egocentric leaders work hard to impress people. It's never really about pleasing God. It's about impressing people. So I'm going to get me a bigger diamond ring. I'm going to get me a better watch. I'm going to drive me a better car, live in a better house. I'm going to impress people because I really want them to think I'm something. And so that insecurity drives people. And here's what happens. Ultimately, it drives them right off the edge of the fiscal cliff. Because we buy things we can't afford. We're doing things that we're not called to do. We're venturing into places that God never ordained or authorized us to go because we're driven by insecurity instead of being led by the Holy Spirit. That is a sure recipe for disaster. Number 6, egocentric leaders live off of the praise of men. That's a dangerous thing because there's going to be times where men don't praise us. Where men criticize us not constructively, but destructively. And if we're addicted to the praise of men and that motivates us, that's going to be a hard way to go. Ultimately, it will destroy us. So don't be that kind of leader. Don't be the egocentric leader. Let God lead you and do great things in His name.